Hey guys, welcome back to System Breakdowns. Today we're talking about Johnny Bones Jones. As always, I'm Greg Koval with Koval Taekwondo, and today we're going to be talking about the systems that John Jones uses that makes him so successful. Because I always say, beginners learn techniques, intermediate students learn concepts, and advanced students, you should be learning systems and how this stuff all bridges together. So, as always, what we're trying to do is look at the systems employed by, in this case, John Jones, and what makes him so successful. Before we start on the actual systems that he uses, there's a couple things I want to touch on. The first one is that he does have a couple advantages coming into this, and he plays to these strengths really well. You know, the fact that he has an 84.5-inch reach means that even against guys at the same height of 6'4", he has in many cases an 8-inch reach on these. When he fought Daniel Cormier, he had a full 12-inch reach advantage. That is a huge advantage. And he plays to that strength a lot in this system, and his system is built around that height advantage, and his other great strength, which is his Greco-Roman wrestling, which is phenomenal. He has some other advantages. The next one is that he looks at a lot of fight footage before he goes into a fight. He is very, very aware of what he's getting into, and he always has a very specific strategy for everybody that he fights. And he's even commented that everybody he fights, he knows exactly what they're going to do from any position at any time because he has spent the hours in looking at what they've done. And you'll see this, you know, when he fought Rampage, he was concerned about the punching power of Rampage. That was what everybody was talking about. And so he came in with that bear crawl. That was the first time you saw him do that, where he didn't allow himself to be engaged in that punching range from a distance. And then he closed the gap and used his wrestling to his advantage and really just cage grinded him. Another example is when he fought Santos. He knew he had the knee surgery, and he just worked the knees and worked the legs over and over and over again with oblique kicks and side kicks, you know, kicks to the calf, kicks to the knee. And we're going to talk a little bit about his strategy with that as well as we go into this. But it's a good example of somebody who had he had a specific weakness, and John Jones came in and exploited it. And we're going to talk about more of that stuff later. The third major advantage is, I'm going to say, his camp. Greg Jackson, having him in the corner, not even just the camp building up to that, but at ringside, in between rounds, has been a huge advantage for him. His cornering advice is unquestionably some of the best that you'll ever see, which is why you see them focus on it so much. A great example of this is when he fought Machida. Machida kept blitzing him, and it was a really, really effective strategy for Machida. And what you hear Greg Jackson say in between rounds is, I want you to feint in with a kick, come back, let him blitz, step off the line, and catch him. And it's really great advice for how he draws in. You know, feint to get the blitz, come back, and step off the line. And that was really great cornering advice. Somebody who's looking at what Machida was doing so successfully and altering the strategy to make John Jones more successful. And it works. So that's a huge advantage. Having a good quarter person in MMA, man, it really makes a difference because you have somebody on the outside who can look at what's going on. But I don't want to spend too much time on that. I want to get right to the system. The one thing I do want to say is please hang in there, because as we go through this system, some of it's going to seem kind of simple at first, but it all ties together. So I want you to kind of hang in there, if you will. All right, that being said, let's get right to it. Okay, before we get started into the offensive stuff, I always like to start with defense. And in this case, John Jones' greatest strength as a striker is his defense. He's so hard to get to. And once again, he uses his reach as a weapon. There's a couple things I want to talk about specifically on this. So first of all, let's talk about his guard. He uses this long hand out, and his right hand is going to come up. And what he does is he makes this a huge barrier that somebody has to get through. And he pulls his head back if they start blitzing him. This is a really important strategy. It served him really well. There's a couple of other advantages to it. By being so long, he'll hang out here, and as somebody starts to come in, this hand comes out, and his right hand comes up and guards his face. A couple of major advantages to this. One, they have to get past this barrier to get to him. With his reach, it's very challenging to do, and guys have struggled. And what it does is it forces them into things that other people don't have to do, right? So it forces them to engage in a kicking game to the body. It forces them to blitz more. And so he uses this to kind of slow them, because what he wants is he wants them to sit here so that he can pick them apart with ones and twos. It's part of his strategy. And so when guys do blitz, he has solutions for that. But in the meantime, it takes somebody who's very aggressive and it chills them out. If you look at his last fight against Reyes, this is a really good example of it. Part of the reason he won this fight is Reyes came in the first couple rounds real aggressive. And over time, he slowed him down. And part of what slowed him was this type of a defense where it made it very challenging to get in and be successful. The other thing that I want to talk about, and I know he's known for the eye pokes, I'm going to be honest, I think this is a deliberate strategy. If you notice, he's never been Dr. Point for an eye poke, and he never started doing it until he fought Alexander Gustafsson. And what he does is this. It's not that he's looking for eye pokes. He's letting them happen, and there's a difference. This hand, he's placing it in front of him like a visor. This is a strategy that I used to do in Taekwondo because I couldn't punch to the head. I would have my hand come up and cover their face and their field of vision so that they couldn't see where I was striking with my punch. It's a very successful strategy, and he does it here where he goes fingers up. And the reason he does that is he wants that threat of fingers poking the eye so that it makes it hard for them to advance. Now for them to advance, before they do anything, they have to get around his hand. And this hand, it's easy to follow them, so it makes it a really, really tough obstacle because they're always threatened by an eye poke. And he can always claim, well, it was an accident. I was just putting my hand out there. But in the meantime, they now have to get around the potential risk of an eye poke in order to strike them. It is a deliberate strategy to help keep them at bay so that he can use his length to pick them apart. This is a really important tactic. The other thing that you'll see him do a lot is a lot of top and inside positional control. This is going to be very important for a lot of strikers who, one, it's going to be very important later on when you talk about his offense, but also in terms of strikers trying to come in at him. Because he has top position, it makes it very hard for them to come underneath and hit him. Because where is he most vulnerable? Down low, right? This is his biggest weakness. It's very hard for guys to come in and blitz at him if they're kept at bay, and it's very hard for guys to drop underneath this if he has top position and he can control that and use his wrestling to defend. So that is the majority of his defense, and it works really, really well for him. Just the sheer length and movement of this is a huge obstacle. And when we talk about leg kicking, I also want you to keep in mind that is also part of his defensive strategy, where he uses these kicks so that as they enter in, they're catching these kicks to the thigh so that he's constantly giving them something that gets caught on. I talked about this in a lot of my other videos for distance management. If you can fluster somebody and every time they come in, they're getting caught on the thigh. Every time they come in, they're getting stifled by a front kick or a side kick. They've got this obstacle in front of them. Every time they try to come around, you're able to just outlink them and move. It's frustrating for them. And that's what you want, is you want them constantly frustrated by this barrier that they can never quite get past. And he is the best at it. He's really, really good at tying this all together. So that is the essential defense that you're going to be looking at. And that defense makes all of his offense possible. So that being said, let's get right to the next part where we start talking about his offensive strategies. Thanks. Okay, guys. Now we're going to start getting into some offensive stuff. We're going to talk about... I broke this down into a couple of areas. And I think that it's important to understand that ultimately his goal is to engage in a clinch. That is where he is the strongest as a fighter. It gives him the opportunities to use takedowns. It gives him the opportunity to control the pace and to grind somebody out, and he's really good at that. That's what he's ultimately looking for. Even when he goes in these long striking bouts, if you notice, his ultimate goal is to get to that grind. He loves that position because he's great at it, much better than almost anybody else in MMA. And so his strategy involves being patient and setting a pace that will allow him to get to where he is strongest. Now, I've broken this down into a couple areas. So you kind of have single attacks, and he uses those single attacks to set up other single attacks. He uses those single attacks to set up entries to get into the clinch. Then he has his clinch strategies and his counters. And then he has some other things that he does as well, like ground and stuff like that, but we're going to talk about that later. But essentially, I've broken this down into parts so you can kind of understand how everything ties together, and it does all pull together in the end into one really unique and amazing system. So let's talk about his single shot offense to begin with. A lot of this is designed, like I said, because of his defense, he's going to use this to set the pace and always be in control at slowly picking at him. When you talk about points in a round, and you look at like the Reyes fight, for example, it looked like Reyes won that fight because he landed some significant shots on him. He had some nice flurries. But if you look at how he broke him down through the round, throughout each round, he would slowly increase points so that even if Reyes got a flurry on him, it didn't matter because he was still winning on points. And that's what he was looking at in this. Because it's MMA, right? It's not the same as a fight. But what he does is he wears him down with these single shots. And he does this also because he sets a pace. He is always in control of distance and pace. These are really the keys to his game. And if you look at it, it's one off, get back. Pop, get back. If they try to come in, he's always covered. He comes back in, he strikes, and he's back out. This is a really important part of, like I said, controlling the rate at which a fight proceeds. He can increase the tempo or decrease it based on what he wants. If he wants to wear somebody out, he'll get aggressive and he'll drive, and you'll see him do that to wear a guy out and grind him, kind of cook him. Or if he gets a guy who's real aggressive, he'll sit out here a lot more. And Reyes was a good example of that, where he stayed out here and boxed a lot longer. The first couple rounds, he let Reyes kind of work a little bit, and he just stayed out and kept him on his heels, kept advancing forward, and essentially just kind of controlled the pace and slowed him down. And that's a really important skill to be able to develop. That's some high-level stuff, and he came in able to do that. It was a really big advantage. As far as the actual strikes he uses, one of the things that he does in a lot of his fights is he really likes to engage in what I call sniping. And what I mean by that is this. Most of the time, he has this huge reach advantage, and he knows it. So it benefits him to get into this game of tag, where I catch you with a jab, and then you try to throw a jab and I defend. And I come out of range, pop, and I'm back out. I'm back in, I throw a cross, and I'm back out, right? And what happens is, in the meantime, they might try to throw a couple shots, but that's okay. I want to get my one off and get back out. And so he doesn't linger in this danger zone. You'll never see him linger in the danger zone. He's always just out of range, strikes and backs just out of range. And he comes in here, pop, right? You see this a lot out of him, where he never lingers in the danger zone. He gets a one-off, and he gets back out. That sniping always is going to favor him, who always has the reach advantage. That is not the game that a guy like Daniel Cormier can allow to happen. He's got to push this, right? And you see that happen in that fight, where he's always pushing the envelope. And John Jones did a really good job of maintaining that range, working him, using these kicks and stuff like that to control the distance. So the sniping game with boxers in particular, guys who like to box, this is always a game that's going to favor him. And if you see, part of the reason he controls this is so he can engage in that type of a one-off boxing strategy. He doesn't want flurries. That's bad for him. Machida used it against him, and it was bad for him. Anytime guys really push the envelope with a lot of flurries, he struggles. Gustafsson, Cormier, anytime he runs in that, it's always a problem. He wants a one-off and get back out. He wants to one-off and get back out. That is how he beats boxers. And that single sniping attitude has worked really well for him. In addition to that, leg kicks are obviously a huge part of his game. Leg kicks give him a lot of advantage, and there's a couple things I want to talk about on this. The first thing is that, if you notice, his first couple attacks will usually be to the muscle, and then he switches and attacks the joint. Because he does this because he wants you to feel comfortable that the muscle, I can eat this. And he doesn't kick it super hard. He tags it, right? It's enough, pop. And then he starts going harder on it as you start feeling comfortable not having to defend it. Man, it's a really brilliant way of approaching it, where he gets it and you feel like, I can do this. This isn't that bad. Until finally, it starts getting bad. And he starts blasting the top of the knee. He starts blasting the side of the knee, right? He starts blasting with that front leg side kick. And all of a sudden, now it's not a minor issue. Now it's a major issue. Then he starts switching to the calf kicks, and it's an even bigger issue. And this slow wear down of the leg, not only is it good for him for points, it's also good for controlling that mobility. Because remember, what does he want? He wants to keep this range where he has the advantage, and he can pick you apart. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, this guy's 6'4", how am I going to use this in my game? The same principle applies. I can still sit out here and keep at the range, snipe him and get back out. Blast him in the leg every time he comes in, and punish him and slowly wear down his mobility to decrease his ability to explode and control a pace. When you get a real aggressive fighter, everybody always asks, this is a very common question, how do I deal with an aggressive fighter? Well, this is it. You keep a long guard, and you punish him every time he comes in, right? You keep these fingers as a threat, right? You keep the jab as a threat. You keep that front leg side kick as a threat. And every time he comes in, you frustrate him. In the meantime, then I stay out of range. I hit him one off, and I get back out. Every time he comes in, I use my mobility, and I stop him. And then I come in, pop, and I get back out, and I stop him. This is how you deal with an aggressive fighter. It is a very successful strategy, and it works really well for him. The other thing that I want to kind of mention that's a really important part of his strategy is his relationship to his opponent. This is something that a lot of people don't notice in his game, but he's very good at. Wherever his opponent's foot is, he never allows him to have this outside position where they can angle on him. And he's very sneaky in how he does it. If you notice, he'll do stuff like this. He'll throw a leg kick and then step down and change his stance. Or if somebody comes after him, he steps back as part of his retreat to do a stance switch on him. And it is a subtle thing that they don't even notice is happening. His angle change, it's very subtle. As he's in here, right, he'll step to the outside and change his stance. If somebody's trying to work the outside on him, let's say they're trying to come to the left side, he doesn't want that for them to get outside. So he'll do this. And now that angle doesn't matter anymore. He's very, very good at subtly changing angles and stances. So when you watch him, be aware of that. And think about that in your own fighting. How can I sneak this in? Whether you're advancing and you throw a technique, he'll do it, for example, on a cross, where he'll throw a punch and change his stance, throw a kick, change his stance, he'll retreat, change his stance. Think about that in your own game, how you can do subtle stance switches and angle changes. Something as simple as this, or not letting them get to that outside position again, right? So that as I do it, if I'm in here and this guy's trying to step to the outside, I blast the leg and I come out. And I'm just outside of him, so he can never get that outside angle that he wants. Really important strategy. So next we're going to talk about things that he looks for countering. Thanks. Okay. Now I want to talk about 3 things that he engages in that are traps that he's always looking for while he's doing these single shots. The first thing that you're going to look for is, because these guys have a hard time blitzing on him, right? They've got this threat here. Anytime they come in, he can use those leg kicks to stop them. It's very frustrating. So what happens is a lot of guys, because they can't get past that reach and get past him, they start engaging in a very obvious attack. He's done what I call funneling. Funneling is luring somebody into predictable motions. And what he has done is he has figured out that by using this system, the most obvious attack for them to engage in is one of a couple things. The first one is body kicks. A lot of guys from the outside, the way they compensate is they want to come in here and throw these body kicks. He catches a ton of kicks in his fighting. He is very, very good at it. He's done it to almost everybody who's ever tried out. Like his success ratio for catching midsection kicks is phenomenal. Because he knows it's coming. He knows that sooner or later, as I pick him apart, he's looking for this. He's looking for the counter kick. He's going to catch it, and he does a couple of different things. He'll come in here and he'll trip. That's a very common one. A big one he likes to do is that counter cross after he catches the leg. He's in here, he picks him apart, he catches, and he throws the counter cross. And a lot of times he gets a knockdown off of it and completes it to a takedown, which is really great. One of my favorite things that he likes to do is, as he's in here, he catches the kick, he switches his grip, and he does the spinning elbow. This is a really fun technique that he does, and he's had a lot of success with it. Man, it's fantastic. But why is he able to do it? Because he knows it's coming. He knows from right here, they're going to get frustrated trying to punch him, and sooner or later, they're going to go for a body kick. Which side are they going to go to? Probably this nearest side, because the far side is too far for them to get to. If I'm here and I've got this huge range in me, it's going to be really hard, especially if I'm fighting orthodox, to get to this far side on him, right? It's too much in my way. So I'm probably going to go to the closed side, and that's what he counts on. He's going to get to here, and he's going to wait for them to come on the closed side. He's going to wait for them to go on this near side rib so he can catch it. And like I said, because he's funneled them into it, it makes it predictable, it makes it easy to address. The second thing that you're going to see a lot is, as he's reaching out here, what do guys do? They put their hand on top, right? They're trying to come up and match it, keep his hand out of the way. He loves that. He comes in here, he traps, and he elbows. So, once again, he knows as he's reaching out here to keep them at bay, a predictable response is to come up to match it and try to get your hand up as well to keep him from getting that jab in your face. So they're going to come up as well to try to be a barrier themselves. From right here, he traps and he uses that long reach to elbow on top. Really, really successful strategy. The third thing that he's looking for is he's looking for them to just drop their head and barrel in. Man, this is good news for him. This is how he gets guillotines and plum clinches all day long. As soon as they start to just bear down and go in like this kind of peekaboo approach, he's going to get on top and he's going to start knee striking the body, and he does it to a lot of guys. Or he's going to pull them down and he's going to hit that guillotine like he did on Machida. And it's nasty. He's got a great guillotine and he's using it on a lot of guys. So once again, he knows after his good defense and his single shot approach to frustrate him, they resort to one of three attacks. They body kick, they get their head down and drive in, or they try to meet that front hand. And he has solutions for those three common things that he's going to run into because he has filtered them down to three specific attacks. And that is the mark of a great system that really plays to his strength. It's like min-maxing in video games or D&D, right? You want to play to your strengths and take away your minimums at all your bad areas and make it hard for them to employ those by using a system that keeps them away from it. So when you build your own system, this is something I want you to keep in mind. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How do you keep guys away from your weaknesses and lure them and funnel them into a place where they can only deal with your strengths and then have solutions for the things that are the outside things, right? And this is what he's done. He knows his strengths is his reach. He knows he can pick them apart and keep them from entering so that they are forced into one of a couple different attacks. The body kick, which he counters, which he counters, which he counters, right? You know, drive buckling in, get their head down, which he counters, right? You see how this goes? Getting that hand up, which he counters. He has solutions. He wants them to do these things because he knows he can beat them in that exchange because he's got a solution that they haven't even, they're reacting, whereas he's being proactive in his response. So while they think that they're being proactive, they're actually being reactive, and they have to now deal with this last second exchange. Hell, it's how he took Daniel Cormier down the first time. Daniel Cormier went to kick to the bottom. He caught it, got on top of the knee, and as Cormier tried to turn out, he stayed on top of the knee and took him down. Very, very nice use of funneling. So those are common reactions. Okay, now let's talk about how he builds off of the single shots. This is a really important part of his game because this is where it all starts tying together. So the first thing is I want to talk about, it's a lot of, once again, focused on exploiting and funneling them into reactions, and as they react to stuff, he now has solutions for different reactions. Just like in the way that in jiu-jitsu, you know, if the guy sits up, you do a sit-up sweep. You know, if he puts that leg up, you do a pendulum sweep. Every time he does it, it's like a flow chart, and he's a flow chart fighter. That's what he is. He creates a situation with his single shots, and it forces them into a reaction, and now that allows him to engage in a follow-through that he can be proactive on. He has a plan in place for it, and that's what is the real brilliance of his plan. So, for example, you know, we've talked about as he's on the outside here, he throws these sniping shots, right? From right here, one of the things he'll do as a follow-up is he'll start coming through, and he notices that if they start driving in a little bit as he starts to throw punches, he'll throw this cross, but his goal is to kind of come as deep as he can because it's almost like he has a third joint. His arms are so long. And he'll come in deep and then elbow strike. Or he'll come in deep and he elbow strike from in close. It's an excellent use of space and his own body in correlation. And essentially what he's done is he said, well, if I strike them, they like to come in close and throw their own counter strike. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to throw my strike, and as they move in close, I'm going to elbow him from that close range. And a lot of times he'll follow that up with a clinch. Some other things that he'll do is as he starts throwing punching, if they start engaging and trying to move in to throw stuff, he'll overshoot it and he'll catch that leg and do that single leg where he's in here. It's either a single leg or an ankle pick depending on what he's trying to do. Another thing I've seen him do is he comes in deep and he overshoots it, and he goes to his head and arm, and from the head and arm, he'll go to that Asotagari, take him down. And so he'll get takedowns, and if he doesn't get the takedown, what he really wants is takedown is best case situation, but worst case situation, he drives them back up against the wall so he can engage in the clinch, which is where he wants to be once again. Now, other things that he'll do for takedown strategies to put them up against the wall include things like doing this knee tap, where he comes in there, feints the single leg, steps through, elbow strikes. You'll see him use this a lot, especially in his early career. You see this a lot. He's kind of slowed off of it because I think people are getting hip to it, and he knows that. But in his earlier fights, the first like 10 or so fights in the UFC, you see this a lot where he reaches in to go for it and does the spinning elbow. And from there, most of the time, he engages in a clinch afterwards. Other things he'll do is he'll go in for that power double. On the power double, if he gets him down, that's great. But what he really wants is he wants to be able to put them up against the wall. And then he can do his good work. That's where he finishes most takedowns. You know what I mean? That's where he does his most damage. That's where he wears them out and he controls things. And he knows it. So he's using that to put their back up against the wall. So that power double to drive them back is a really important tool. Some other things that you'll see him do, and I want to talk about some of the reactions based off of his kicking game to the legs and to the punching. These are other important reactions that it's a flow chart, right? Depending on what I give them, if they go this way, I'm going to do this. If they go this way, I do this. Some of the things that he'll do is from the punching here, and we talked about that cross and the jab and stuff like that. One of the things that people will do is sometimes they'll start to cover up here. If he does that, he's going to go both hands on top, and that's when you see these flying knee strikes. Another thing that he'll do is from the leg kicking game, he does a lot of mixing it up, right? He's a single shot fighter, so he wants to pick them apart and never attack the same thing twice. And this is an important strategy of his. So he'll attack the leg, and then he'll attack the front kick to the body, right? He'll attack the leg with a side kick, and then he'll step in and do the close range turning back kick. He'll do an oblique kick, and then maybe he'll do a side kick to the body, right? Because they're used to that side kick to the leg, so they're going side kick to the body this time. But where it gets really fun is if he can create reactions off of this stuff. He does this stuff like the midsection striking to the body because he's caught them sleeping, right? He's caught them here, and he knows they're not paying attention, and they're thinking leg kicks, so it's an easy attack of opportunity. But what he really wants is for them to react to it. So as he starts attacking low, the next thing he'll do is he might do a double roundhouse kick. He might do a question mark kick. Right? See how as they start to react to it, he starts exploiting it. Another thing he'll do is as he attacks the legs, if they start leaning forward a lot, he'll do a flying knee off of that. We talked about the flying knee where he'll get both hands out and then he'll come in here, flying knee this way. The other way he'll do it is if he can get them leaning over, reacting to a leg kick because their head's dropped for it. In much the same way that Machida would use this flying knee, by attacking the leg, it gets their head forward and then he does a flying knee. It's the same strategy as we talked about in the Machida video where he does that. So it's cool to see how his flow chart works, where it's all single shots until it's time not to be. So he uses these basic leg attacks and the basic sniping to set up his hook kicks, to constantly be attacking from different heights, angles, and directions. And then as they start to react to stuff, he exploits it. If they drop down, it's the flying knee strike, right? If they start coming up here and trying to close up, then he does the flying knee off of top control. If they start reacting to the leg kick, he switches up, goes to the head of the question mark kick, stuff like that. And this mix-up makes it very hard to contend with when they're already frustrated not being able to get in on them. And what he's done is he's taken the single shot game and he's put them in his advantage. I hope this makes sense. I know I'm throwing a lot at it. It makes sense in my mind, but I'm trying to verbalize it. So from right here, once again, they're defensively at a disadvantage where they can never quite close that gap on him. It's very frustrating to them. He's constantly threatening. He's playing the sniping game from the range. He's picking apart at their legs, taking away their mobility, setting the pace. And then he starts doing techniques to drive in. When they start getting frustrated, if they stop what they're doing, he comes in aggressive. He comes in aggressive, right? If he starts getting their head to drop, he comes in here, right? If they start to react, once again, he goes to his counters, right? Pow. You see what I'm saying? Where it's all tied together. As he's in here, he throws that cross, and maybe he goes to an elbow. Or maybe they get used to it, so he goes to an ankle pick, and he drives them back. These are all entries to get them back up against the wall and start constantly keeping them guessing what's next. This way they can never get a read on what's coming. It's what makes him so challenging to fight. All right? Thank you. All right, guys, we talked about how his ultimate goal is to get into a clinch game. Because I don't have a partner, I'm going to try to express this as best as I can. I think I should be okay, but if there's any confusion, sorry, it's just what I'm limited to while I'm at home. A couple things I want to talk about on this. So, like I said, his whole game up until this point has really been to drive them back. You know, he's a great striker, and as he goes on, he gets more and more comfortable just striking, but he still really is always going to feel his most comfortable once he's backed them up and he gets them in a clinch. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that he can wear down their energy while he's in a pretty strong position. And he's done this to a bunch of guys who are much, much better than him. And honestly, a lot of guys underestimate his ability from a clinch. You know, he's gone against some really, really elite wrestlers that people assumed were just going to take him down at will. You know, not the least of which was Daniel Cormier, who is probably one of the best wrestlers to ever go into UFC. And people assumed Daniel Cormier was going to take him down at will. And because of the way that he engages in a clinch, it made him very successful. So I want to talk about, it has changed a little bit. This is another area that he's changed as he's gone on and as he's gotten more experience. You know, his earlier fights, this is all he wanted was to engage in that clinch. And what he was looking for was an overhook and one of two things. Either he would go 2-on-1 on the wrist, and what he would do is he would go to this Kimura grip. And this is a move I like to use a lot. In fact, I'm probably going to do a video just on this with an overhook. And as they start circling underneath, he grabs the wrist, he grabs his own wrist, and he punches it to the body. And from here, he attacks with his shoulder and he attacks with knees. And what he wants off of this is for them to start moving around so he can do an outside trip, right? This is the type of stuff he really likes to engage in from here. Or as he does this, he likes to come in for this long Kauchigari where, you know, this long inside trip where he catches it and he drives them way back so that they're way back on their heels and he takes them down. He's had a lot of success with that technique. Once again, it's a lot of from right here. Elbows are always an opportunity. Knees are an opportunity. He loves the shoulder strike. I mean, we've all seen him do that a bunch. The other thing that you'll see him do is from an overhook, he gets in here, and sometimes he gets that far wrist. Maybe he can't get that inside wrist because maybe the guy, their hand is like this. Like they've got an underhook, and they're not trying to circle their hand back underneath. Or maybe they are, and he just doesn't feel like that's the first thing he wants to grab. He grabs that far side wrist, and now he's got control here, and he'll do a lot of the same stuff, right? He starts doing the elbows and the knees and the shoulders and all this stuff, and he works them from this position, and he just kind of leans into him from way back, and he kind of hangs out like this a lot of times. And usually he likes his head on the far side, actually, but he'll come in here and then shoulder up into him. And part of the reason he does that, once again, it's using his height and his Greco-Roman skills to an advantage. The third type of a position that he likes to grab is if he can't get the overhook and they're keeping their arms tight because they know, he'll go for a 2-on-1 and he'll just start wrist fighting here a bunch. And you'll see him engage in both hands as he starts doing these same attacks. Now, a couple things that are consistent from all of these positions. I just mentioned it because these are the three positions he most likes to go through. But all of these, he's looking for a lot of the same things. From right here, he wants to wear them out. Shoulder strike, elbow strike, knee strike. One of the things he likes to do is he likes to step across and spinning elbow them from here. You'll see him do that from all these positions. And usually he uses that as an exit from this position. He's gotten all he feels like he can get out of this. Maybe he feels like he can't complete a takedown. Maybe he feels like he's worn them out and he wants to go back to striking. Maybe he feels like he just wants to disengage for whatever reason and then re-engage. He'll get to here, step across, spinning elbow, and then disengage. That is his disengagement technique most of the time. And he does it because he lands it. Almost every time I've seen him throw it, he pretty much lands it. He's very, very high success rate with it. Other things he likes to do. One of the things that everybody has seen him do a ton of times is from right here, while he's engaging in this, if they start to try to attack his head or try to guillotine him or something like that, he goes real low and he gets these long ass arms around those legs because their legs will be in a nice wide base. He doesn't care. He'll grab them and he'll pull them back and then it's down on the ground. He does this successfully all the time. He's very, very good at this. But the biggest thing is, man, he loves getting in these positions. And the overhook, he loves this a lot because, especially early on in his career, you see him hit a lot of lateral drops. And now people are very cautious of that with him as a result. The rest of his career, since pretty much since he became the champion is where it started to change. You know, pre him being a champion, he would hit lateral drops on the over-under all the time. After that, people started getting nervous about it, so he'd get the overhook. And that's where, people start tucking that arm back, so he starts getting a wrist control and attacking other stuff. He goes to the 2-on-1, right? Or they get both their arms back, and he gets double wrist control, and he wrist fights with them. And then he starts doing this stuff, and then he goes low on them. You know, he's very, very successful at hitting these strategies and putting people on the ground. And honestly, from these positions, he's very hard to contend with. But I will say that the guys who have been most successful against him are guys who had two things: a long reach so that they could engage in striking, and a really good takedown defense. Gustafsson and Reyes were the two guys who were the most successful against him, and a lot of it is because they had good takedown defense, and he couldn't really implement his strongest part of his game, which was get to a clinch and use Greco-Roman skills to take him down. I don't know if there's anybody better at that type of wrestling in the UFC, especially when you add striking into the mix. And why? Because he sticks with a couple strategies. He comes in here, he goes for the underhook. If he can get the underhook, he's going for lateral drops or he's going for trips, right? If he can't get that, he's going to go 2-on-1 or he's going to go for the far side wrist. And he's going to engage in striking and knees until he can get, some sort of a Kauchigari or something like that. He's going to use his wrestling once again. If he can't get that, he's going to start wrist fighting. And he's going to lean in real far with his shoulder as he starts engaging in striking. If he gets frustrated, he'll disengage with the elbow. Otherwise, he's going to come underneath with the long arms and pull them out. It's a system, right? He knows no matter what they try to do from here, they're never going to be as good at these places as he is. And it works for him. So that's really the core to what he wants, which is why he's always trying to get there, in my belief. He might work the striking from the outside to slow them down long enough for him to get there, but eventually he's going to get there. He's going to wear them down. He's going to set a pace. He's going to grind them. He's eventually going to take them down, and then he's going to win. And this is what he's done time and time and time again. And it's not a super complex strategy. He knows that his wrestling skills allow him a lot of opportunities from there. He only really uses, 4 or 5 different throws, but he uses them so well. This rotating trip, he's hit that on a lot of guys. That deep inside Cauchy, he's hit a lot of guys. The same type of things, the double legs and all that stuff. Same single legs. He's not doing anything crazy extravagant. There's a lot of throws that you don't see him use, Harai Goshi and stuff like that. But a lot of it is because he knows his strategy. He knows he's going to get to these clinches and he's going to be successful. Sometimes you'll see him engage in a clinch not on the wall. He usually doesn't engage in that very long. It might be just for a second, throw a couple strikes, and then he disengages. And he's done that in a couple fights. But generally speaking, he wants them up against the wall because he knows that from right here, man, if I've got somebody grinding into me, I got to carry their weight as well as mine. It's so hard. I can't move. I can't escape this. And it's so hard to contend with. And that's really what he wants. All right, guys, we're getting towards the end. So I just want to touch on 2 short things that I think are also important parts of his game that I just haven't gone into yet. The first part is the ground I want to talk about. His ground strategy is pretty simple. Essentially, he's going to get to a top half guard. And from there, he's looking to swim that arm through and get to a guillotine. He's landed on a lot of guys. Short of that, the next thing he wants to go to is get to side control. He usually does a knee cut or something like that. Gets to a side control. He pins the arm with his knee, and he starts bottom fisting the guy. And if the guy starts putting their hand up, he's going to go for the Americana. He's had a lot of success with that. You will see him attack the back and stuff like that too, but a lot of times he's going to end up in one of these 2 positions. The other thing I want to mention is the last 10 seconds of a round. That's when you really got to watch him for the fun shit. If you look at the when he gets that round, here's that click, click, click. At that point, he will almost always try something a little bit more reckless that is high risk but high payoff. And he does it because he knows that there's less consequence. In some cases, like there was, I can't remember who it was against, but he was in a half guard, and he stepped over and he went for a knee bar. He didn't get it, but it didn't matter. It was a nice punctuation on the round, and if he gotten it, great, but if not, that's okay too, because he knows he's only got 10 seconds left. You'll see him do spinning crescent kicks, right? He doesn't really do the spinning, the turning wheel kick proper. He more just does, right, and just tries the spinning crescent kick. He'll do axe kicks, right? He's pulled guard and shot for triangles. The last 10 seconds is always a really explosive 10 seconds, and it's something that's nice that he capitalizes on to really get the most out of his round. Alright guys, I know this has been a long video, but I want to just get some final thoughts in here. A couple quick things that I want you to take from this. One, obviously you're not going to be as long as John Jones, but once again, we're looking at building the system, so I just wanted to talk about, like, make sure when you're building your system, here's some things that you can incorporate into your game. One, using the long guard and using footwork to keep them at bay, right? I don't encourage you with your sparring partner to put your fingers in his eyes, so if you're going to be up here, just make sure your fingers are up so that you're not poking him in the eye. But you can still use this as a visor, to blind his visor. You can still use kicks for distance control. From right there, anytime they come in, use this to a couple predictable motions so that you can catch body kicks. You can get them so that they barrel down, so you can get the guillotines and the plum clinches and stuff like that. Force them to always funnel in to engage on your terms. Then, once you're doing your sniping attacks, work the legs. Obviously in your buddy, you're not attacking the joint itself, just attack the thighs and stuff. But if you're doing an actual fight, this is a good strategy. Attacking the muscle and then attacking the joint. Using these long distance and then getting back out of range. Play a sniping battle. One-us. Then mix it up so that you're never attacking the same thing twice. And then from there, have a couple solutions for driving in to a place where you can work and wear them out. If you don't want to use these same strategies, that's fine. I don't. These are not my strategies. I don't come in here. I'm probably going to play with this in my sparring tonight, but my go-tos for backing people off is different. I use hopping front kicks and push kicks and stuff like that. That's the type of stuff I like to engage in. I might throw like what Conor McGregor does, where I'll throw, I'll come in here with a wheel kick to back them off and then close the range and then sit on the outside. Whatever it is, have a couple solutions in your pocket for moving people to where you want them to be. This is what I want you to take away from this. His solutions just happen to work towards his strength, which is his wrestling. Have a couple things where wherever your strongest place is, put yourself there. Always be where you are stronger than they are. If you're a great boxer, never allow them to leave the pocket. How are you going to do that? You need to have solutions to always put them where you want them to be. Control the pace, control the distance, and control the fight. This is your big takeaways from this. I mentioned the things that he's strongest at. His reach and his wrestling are his big strengths. So he uses that to his advantage and he puts himself there. Figure out what your strengths are and put yourself there. But that's it for this. Thanks for watching, guys.